Her calm smile hid the truth. What police found was pure evil. The sun was just beginning to rise over Lakewood, a quiet suburban town where the loudest thing most mornings was the hum of sprinklers and the sound of coffee machines. But that morning, something was different. Patrol cars lined the cul-de-sac of Birchwood Drive, red and blue lights flashing against perfectly trimmed lawns. A young woman named Lena Carter, 28, had been reported missing by her employer the previous night. She'd left work at 6 p.m., clocked out as usual, and vanished. Her phone went straight to voicemail. Her car, a silver Toyota, was found parked outside her neat little home. Purse on the passenger seat. Keys still in the ignition. Detective Evan Brooks, a calm but relentless investigator with 15 years on the force, stood on her porch staring at the front door. Something about the stillness unsettled him. There were no signs of forced entry, no struggle, no broken glass, just silence. He turned to Officer Ramirez. "Neighbors hear anything?" Ramirez shook his head. "Nothing. They said Lena lived alone. Kept to herself. Always polite, quiet, smiled a lot." Brooks exhaled, his gaze flicking to the mailbox. Inside were bills, magazines, and one pale blue envelope with no return address. The handwriting was neat, almost elegant, and the postmark was from 3 towns over. He slid it into an evidence bag. "Get this to the lab. Let's see who's writing love letters in invisible ink." Inside the house, everything looked staged. The couch cushions were perfectly aligned, a candle burned halfway down on the coffee table, and a soft classical tune played on loop from a small speaker. It was eerie, like someone had tried to make it feel normal. The kitchen sink gleamed, dishes stacked neatly in the rack. But when Brooks opened the fridge, something caught his eye. A Tupperware container labeled LC, Thursday. Inside wasn't food. It was a folded Polaroid photograph, sealed in plastic wrap. He carefully removed it. The image showed a young woman, tied to a chair, eyes wide in terror. The background looked like an old basement, concrete walls stained and cracked. "Jesus," Ramirez muttered. "You think that's her?" Brooks didn't answer. He just stared at the photo. Because behind the woman in the picture, barely visible in the corner, was another figure. A shadowy outline of someone standing still, watching. They traced Lena's last known movements. Security footage from a gas station near her work showed her car passing by at 6:12 p.m. But the driver's face wasn't hers. The figure behind the wheel wore oversized sunglasses and a wig, but the jawline, sharp and familiar, looked oddly like her. By mid-morning, the investigation expanded. Search teams combed the nearby woods, divers scanned the lake, and detectives started interviewing everyone close to Lena. One name stood out repeatedly: Grace Ellison, Lena's neighbor. A woman in her mid-30s who always waved from across the street, the kind of neighbor who baked cookies for holidays and fed other people's cats when they were away. When detectives knocked on her door, she opened it with a calm, almost warm smile. "Officers," she said softly, "I was wondering when you'd come." Brooks raised an eyebrow. "You were expecting us?" "Well," she said, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, "it's not every day the street fills with flashing lights. I assumed it was about Lena. Poor girl. Such a sweetheart." Her house was spotless. White curtains, lavender candles, soft piano music playing in the background, just like Lena's. "Did you see or hear anything unusual last night?" Brooks asked. Grace tilted her head slightly, as if considering. "No, I'm afraid not. I went to bed early, but I did notice a car pull into her driveway around sunset. Thought it was a friend. It wasn't unusual, Lena had company sometimes." Brooks scribbled notes. "Can you describe the car?" She smiled faintly. "Silver. Same as hers." Ramirez exchanged a glance with him. When they left, Brooks paused on the porch, looking back. Grace stood in the doorway, still smiling, polite, gentle, like nothing in the world could rattle her. But behind that smile, her eyes didn't move. They just watched. Back at the station, the forensics report came in. The fingerprints on the blue envelope matched Lena Carter's, but the writing inside was not hers. The letter was brief. "It's finally done. No one will ever find her. Signed." Brooks felt his stomach tighten. "Grace Ellison," he whispered. Detectives returned to Grace's home that evening with a warrant. But when they arrived, the house was empty. The front door was unlocked, the air thick with a faint scent of bleach. On the kitchen counter sat a single teacup and a handwritten note. "You're too late. She's already gone." The search that followed was massive. Drones, dogs, volunteers, scouring miles of wooded land and abandoned farmhouses. At dawn, a deputy found tire tracks near an old storage facility 10 miles out. One of the units had its padlock freshly cut. Inside were plastic containers stacked neatly against the wall, each labeled with initials and dates. But it wasn't until Brooks pried open the last container that he realized the scale of it. Inside were photographs, hundreds of them. All women, all missing. And in the bottom corner of every photo was the same delicate handwriting. She smiled beautifully. Brooks turned to Ramirez, voice low and grim. "This isn't just one missing person case." He lifted the final photograph, one of Lena, smiling faintly, sitting in what looked like a basement chair. He flipped it over. On the back, written in that same perfect handwriting, were 3 words. "Grace forgives her." Brooks exhaled slowly, staring into the darkness beyond the unit. "Then who does she punish?" he whispered. But when they opened the back room of the storage unit, what they found changed everything. The back room of the storage unit smelled of rust, bleach, and something faintly sweet, lavender, like the candles Grace kept burning in her immaculate living room. A single bulb swung from the ceiling, its flicker painting the concrete walls in uneven light. Detective Evan Brooks hesitated before stepping inside. On the far wall hung dozens of framed photographs, women of different ages, races, and backgrounds. Each one smiling. Each photo signed neatly in cursive, "Grace Ellison." "Jesus," Ramirez murmured behind him. "She collected them." Brooks ran a gloved hand across the nearest frame. The faces were eerily similar in expression. Calm, serene, almost rehearsed. Not victims, not strangers. Portraits. Carefully posed. "Get forensics down here," Brooks ordered, his voice low. "And I want every missing persons file from the last 10 years pulled." He turned toward the table in the corner. On it sat a camera, still on, the battery light blinking faintly. Beside it lay a freshly developed photo, Lena Carter, smiling that same unnatural smile. Her eyes, though, were different. Terrified. Brooks exhaled. "She's still alive." Ramirez frowned. "How can you tell?" "She's looking at something. Not the camera. The person taking the photo. The person who took it was Grace." Back at the precinct, the discovery ignited chaos. Journalists crowded the front steps, headlines already spreading about the photographer of fear. But Brooks didn't care about theories. He wanted Grace. The warrant for her arrest went national by morning. Her car had been spotted at a gas station 2 towns over, but by the time local police arrived, she was gone. Surveillance footage showed her buying coffee, smiling politely at the cashier, then leaving calmly, as if she had nowhere to hide. Every new lead felt like a trap she'd laid out herself. When analysts reviewed the photos, they found something odd. The background of each image, though dim and indistinct, had the same feature: a faint tiled wall with an old-fashioned drain in the floor. An industrial type used in older facilities. A search through property records led Brooks to an abandoned cosmetic clinic on the outskirts of town, shuttered for over a decade. Grace's late father had owned it. The name on the deed? Ellison Aesthetic Recovery Center. Brooks tightened his grip on the steering wheel as he and Ramirez pulled up to the rotting building later that night. "Looks like the kind of place where nightmares go to breathe," Ramirez muttered. The front door creaked open easily. Dust floated through the flashlight beams like ash. A broken reception desk sat covered in old patient files. Faded posters on the wall read, "Everyone deserves to feel beautiful." The basement door stood slightly ajar. A cold draft seeped through, carrying with it a faint hum, the sound of electricity. Brooks motioned for silence and stepped down first. The basement was large, filled with surgical chairs, cracked mirrors, and medical instruments long abandoned. But near the back, a single room glowed faintly through frosted glass. Inside, Someone was humming. He pushed the door open. Grace Ellison stood at a surgical table, her hands clasped, humming to herself as if preparing for a dinner party. The same calm smile curved her lips. On the table beside her sat a camera, rolls of film, and a photo of Lena Carter, alive, eyes half closed, bound but unharmed. Grace turned slowly when she heard the door. "Detective Brooks," she said softly. "You're just in time." "Hands where I can see them," Brooks said, gun drawn. "Where is she?" Grace's smile didn't waver. "Safe. For now." She was beautiful before, but she didn't see it. None of them did. "Grace, step away from the table." She obeyed, gracefully, almost theatrically, raising her hands. "You think I hurt them, but I didn't. I helped them. I gave them peace. I made them still." Brooks kept his gun steady. "Where is Lena Carter?" Grace looked past him, eyes flicking toward a small door in the corner of the room. "You should see her. She's been waiting for you." Brooks motioned to Ramirez, who approached the door cautiously. The air behind it was colder, heavier. He pushed it open and froze. The room was filled with mannequins. At first glance, they looked artificial, posed elegantly in chairs, their faces painted with faint smiles. But the longer he stared, the more wrong they looked. Because those weren't mannequins. Each one was human, preserved, perfectly still. Their eyes were closed. Their lips curved in soft, peaceful smiles. Ramirez stumbled back. "Oh my God!" Grace's voice floated behind them, calm and chilling. "They wanted to be perfect. They begged me to make them that way. You can't imagine the peace they felt when the smiling started." Brooks turned on her, fury breaking through his composure. "You killed them." "No," Grace said. "They were broken long before I found them. I just helped them stay beautiful." The air in the room seemed to close in, thick and suffocating. The light flickered, casting long shadows over the frozen faces. Then Brooks saw her, Lena, sitting in the far corner, head tilted down. Her wrists bound, eyes half open. "Lena!" Brooks shouted, rushing to her. She stirred weakly, eyes unfocused. "Said she could make me better." Brooks cut her restraints and lifted her head gently. Her pulse was weak, but she was alive. Behind him, Grace's voice softened. "She's almost ready. Just one more smile and she'll understand." Before Brooks could react, Grace lunged toward the table, grabbing a scalpel. Ramirez fired, a single deafening shot. Grace crumpled to the floor, the smile finally gone from her face. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then, from behind the glass, a faint mechanical whir started up. The old projector on the far wall flickered to life. Images flashed one after another, all of Grace's victims, smiling endlessly, their eyes unblinking. Brooks looked at the screen, heart pounding. Each photo faded into the next, until the last one filled the wall. It was him, Detective Evan Brooks, smiling, taken from across his kitchen table. Ramirez froze. "Brooks, when was that taken?" Brooks said nothing. He stared at the photo, his reflection caught in the screen's glow. Because taped just below his smiling image were 3 words, scrawled in delicate handwriting. "Grace forgives you." The lights flickered again. And when they turned back toward the spot where Grace's body had fallen, she was gone. The projector clicked off, plunging the basement into near darkness. Only the faint hum of old fluorescent bulbs remained. Detective Evan Brooks stood motionless, staring at the spot where Grace Ellison's body had been seconds earlier. Gone. No blood trail, no sound, no explanation, just the lingering scent of lavender and bleach. "Brooks," Ramirez whispered, sweeping his flashlight across the concrete. "She couldn't have just vanished. We've got one way in and one way out." Brooks didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the words still scrawled beneath the projected image. "Grace forgives you." He felt something cold move through him. Not fear. Guilt. "Secure Lena," he said finally, his voice low, controlled. "Call an ambulance. I'm going after her." Ramirez grabbed his arm. "Evan, stop. You saw her go down. No one survives that." Brooks met his gaze. "You've seen what she does. If she's alive, she's not finished. Outside, the night air bit hard. The sky hung low, thick with clouds, and the wind carried the smell of wet soil and rust. Brooks scanned the lot, flashlight cutting through mist. The field behind the clinic stretched out into darkness, the remains of an old road leading toward the woods. Then he saw it, fresh footprints in the mud, small, deliberate, headed toward the trees. He followed them, one step at a time. His breath came in slow bursts, his boots sinking into soft earth. The trees swallowed the world around him until only the beam of his flashlight and the distant echo of his own heartbeat remained. Then he saw movement ahead, someone standing between the trees. "Grace!" he shouted. The figure didn't move. When he drew closer, the flashlight illuminated her face. Grace Allison, barefoot, her white blouse torn and stained with dirt. Her hair hung loosely, her expression unreadable. But her eyes, those calm, pale eyes, seemed almost peaceful. "You shouldn't have followed me," she said softly. "You're under arrest," Brooks said, gun raised. "Hands where I can see them." Grace smiled faintly, stepping into the light. "You think this ends with handcuffs? You still don't understand, do you? This wasn't about them. It was never about them." Brooks took a cautious step forward. "Then who?" "You," she whispered. "You were my first." The words hit him like a physical blow. "I met you years ago, remember?" she continued. "When you worked the Montgomery case. You were kind to me. I was broken back then, ugly, invisible. You told me I should smile more." Brooks froze, flashes of memory cutting through the fog. A grief counseling group, a young woman with dark hair, nervous but gentle. He had said that to her once. He'd forgotten the case, the victims, but she hadn't forgotten him. If you love true crime stories, unsolved mysteries, and shocking real investigations, hit subscribe, like and turn on notifications.